Fala pessoal, tudo bem? Meu nome é Yuri, eu sou diretor de eventos do Instituto Atlantos. Estou aqui representando hoje com a Isabela do IFL, também com o David Bailey, errei, Bailey, né? E também gostaria de introduzir hoje o Instituto Atlantos para vocês. Para quem não conhece, nós somos sediados em Porto Alegre. Nós estamos hoje debatendo e qualificando o debate dentro da academia. Nosso foco é capacitar jovens para que possam estar divulgando e propagando as ideias liberais pelas suas faculdades, porque a gente entende que hoje o movimento dentro do sistema brasileiro não é muito bom e também no âmbito acadêmico. Então hoje, aqui em Porto Alegre, nós trabalhamos essa vertente liberal para que a gente consiga capacitar os jovens. E também, todo ano nós fazemos a nossa conferência, e estaremos indo para a nossa 8ª conferência, que vai tratar sobre autoritarismo jurídico. Então, para mais informações e também quem se interessar pelo assunto, a gente vai deixar o link aqui abaixo para que vocês possam conferir as informações. E também, se estiverem em Porto Alegre, estarem conosco neste grande evento que vai seguir comentando e qualificando o debate na academia, tanto em Porto Alegre quanto no Brasil e no mundo. Agora eu passo para a Isa.
Oi, gente, tudo bem? Eu sou a Isabela, sou diretora de fórum e vice-presidente do IFL Jovem em São Paulo. E o IFL Jovem em São Paulo é um instituto que forma lideranças jovens em São Paulo, com foco nas ideias liberais, mas também falando sobre empreendedorismo, falando sobre mercado de trabalho, mercado financeiro. E hoje a gente trouxe esse convidado muito especial, que é o David Bailey, que hoje é o atual CMO da Azteco, mas também tem uma trajetória muito incrível em várias big techs, e ele vai contar um pouquinho pra gente, nada melhor do que ele mesmo para se apresentar. Então, com a palavra, agora a gente vai começar a falar em inglês, só para avisar a todos vocês que estão acompanhando. Vamos manter as legendas e a gente também vai colocar todo um sistema aí para vocês poderem acompanhar essa live. David, hello.
Hi.
You'd like to introduce yourself before we
Sure.
start?
So my name is David Bailey. A bit of background on me. My professional background is I've worked for many years with startups and scale-ups and enterprises. I've worked with small companies, large companies. So I worked at Apple for 10 years. I worked at Samsung. I've also worked kind of across many different functions, marketing, finance, and product. And today I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Azteco. So Azteco sells Bitcoin vouchers, which work just like prepaid vouchers. So it's great for people who want to get small amounts of Bitcoins for everyday payments, consumers, people without bank accounts, all those kind of things. So great to be here today.
Great. Yuri, do you want to start with our questions?
Of course. So, David, the first question is, how do you see the role of the Bitcoin in Brazil, especially considering the economic scenario and the political issues in the country?
Yeah. So there's two things I see. One is Bitcoin as a parallel solution for payments. So Bitcoin doesn't have to replace a local currency. There are some places like El Salvador where they've done that. But in most countries, Bitcoin can just work alongside the traditional government currencies as a parallel solution for payments. And the important thing here is just give people choice, give them a freedom of choice. If they want to use a new technology, don't get in the way, just let them use it. You know, I'm reminded of kind of Skype 20 years ago when it was introduced. A lot of the telcos, a lot of the mobile operators didn't like it. It threatened them, and they came up with all kinds of reasons why people shouldn't be allowed to use Skype. You see the same kind of thing today. A lot of objection from banks, but actually just give people the choice. So number one, I see it as a parallel solution. And the second thing is just like a backup solution for payments. You know, it's always good to have a backup. There's always risk that things might change that you just can't predict. Political risk, economic risk, technological risk. You know, a few years ago in the UK, all the ATMs in the country went down for a couple of days. Nobody would have expected. Nobody had cash. So what are you going to do when you accidentally get locked out of your bank account somehow? Well, what are you going to do if a legacy payment system breaks? That's where Bitcoin is like a backup solution and a parallel solution. I think there's a huge opportunity.
That's very
Thank you.
Yeah. And what's your vision for the future of Bitcoin in Brazil and how we can see the positive impact on a Brazilian economy and society and in general?
So I think the the big future for Brazil and most countries is, consumer adoption of Bitcoin for everyday payments. So Bitcoin was never designed to be a speculative store of wealth. If you go back and you look at the original white paper, it was designed for everyday payments. It was designed for ordinary people to make small online payments. So one thing we need to move from saying things like, what's the price of Bitcoin? When did you buy Bitcoin? And we need to move and say things like, can I pay you in Bitcoin? I need to pay you for that work. I need to send you some money for my share of the dinner. Can I just send you in Bitcoin? So definitely consumer adoption of Bitcoin, using it for everyday payments. But I also think, again, it's the freedom of choice thing. You get a better society if you give people a freedom of choice. If you give them a couple of options to choose from, they'll choose the one that works best for them, which will be faster and better and cheaper. If you don't give people choice, you only give them one option, you end up with these kind of quasi-monopoly solutions that hold society back. So you see this sometimes in countries where the government runs the telco or the government runs the energy company. Of course, they like that because they've got like a quasi-monopoly. But ultimately, it's society that suffers because people don't have choice. And when you have choice, you have more options and the choices get better.
Yeah.
So David, what's the keys is the key difference of the buy Azteco voucher compared to buying a Bitcoin from another exchange?
Okay. So one thing is ownership. Most exchanges will insist on storing your Bitcoin for you, either on their servers or in their wallet. And so this means that they have control of your Bitcoin, which obviously is a security risk. So companies like FTX can use your Bitcoin for something else. With an Azteco Bitcoin voucher, you're the one always in control of your Bitcoin. So you buy a voucher from us, you can use lots of Bitcoin wallets to redeem that voucher. You redeem the voucher, the Bitcoin goes in your wallet, and then you're completely in control. Azteco has no part, no control, no ownership of your Bitcoin at that point. So I think number one, ownership is big, is huge, especially when you look at problems like FTX. The second thing I would say is the amount of the Azteco Bitcoin vouchers. So exchanges are not designed for small value purchases. So for example, if you want just like $5 or $10 worth of Bitcoin because you want to make an online payment, the exchanges will charge you really high fees. Some of them won't even let you buy Bitcoin in that kind of small amount. Azteco Bitcoin vouchers, you can get them for as little as $10 or as much as $1,000. So it's great. You can buy just as much you need for whatever it is you're doing. And then the third thing I'd say is just, ease of use and privacy. So again, if you want to use an exchange, you have to kind of go through an identity process to kind of verify your identity. You have to send your passport or your driving license into some servers for people to look at. There's privacy concerns there. It takes a long time as well. Also, many of them want you to connect a bank account. I want to connect a bank account or a payment card, which isn't an option for a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there without bank accounts. The beauty of the Azteco Bitcoin vouchers is you can buy one with cash, with card, and we'll never force you to create an account or download an app. So you can think of it like an express checkout on an e-commerce website. It's just the easiest and quickest way to get Bitcoin.
Great. That's really good, and it's very important for us to really bring up the light on the difference between having a wallet and having an exchange, because a lot of people in Brazil, when we see like the scenario and stuff, a lot of people have the misconception if they have Bitcoin in an exchange, that's their wallet, and they're two different things. And that's very nice that you said that, David. Moving on to a next question. It's how do you believe the integration of Bitcoin into the traditional financial systems, such as banking and remittances, how that can benefit the Brazilian economy, especially in this scenario now?
Yeah. So two things I'd say here. Number one is efficiency. That's a definite benefit to the economy because the Bitcoin payments are always going to be faster and cheaper than traditional bank payments, especially when it comes to international transactions or wire transfers. The legacy banks, the legacy financial organizations, they make a lot of money from the slow, expensive processes. So they're kind of, reluctant to embrace new technology. But Bitcoin payments are more efficient, they are quicker, and that's overall only going to be good for the country's economy. The first thing, efficiency, second thing, inclusion. So Bitcoin brings new freedoms to people who don't have a bank account. So these people can make their online payments, they can save safely for the future, they can send Bitcoin to family and friends anywhere in the world. Those people today are completely excluded from certain parts of the economy because they only have cash and they don't meet the criteria for a bank account. So again, I just think if we can include more people in the economy like this, it's going to grow and ultimately everyone's going to benefit.
Great.
Oh, nice. So, David, what's the most challenging part, in your opinion, about the market search a unique product like the Azteco Bitcoin vouchers?
Yeah, so this is one that we think about every day in our marketing team. And the first problem is the existing reputation of Bitcoin. So unfortunately, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies have developed a bad reputation over the years. There's lots of cryptocurrencies out there that honestly, they're just pure scams. But Bitcoin is something quite different. But unfortunately, guess what? The media, they like writing sensational stories about Bitcoin getting lost or stolen. So they'll write about FTX, for example, but they're less interested in writing a positive story about how consumers are using that Bitcoin to make small everyday payments. So the first challenge is just like existing perception of Bitcoin. The second challenge that goes with that is, the people that use Bitcoin today are very passionate, enthusiastic advocates. They love Bitcoin, and it's very common with a new technology, whether it's kind of phones or Bitcoin or whatever, it's very common for the new technology to be adopted very enthusiastically by kind of a small group of early adopters. But it's also quite common that new technology gets stuck with this group of early adopters and it never quite reaches the mass market. It never quite reaches the consumers. And what we see quite often is, the mass market, they're interested in using Bitcoin, but they look at the people using it today and it's the early adopters who, they're very enthusiastic, but they've kind of got their own language, their own kind of memes. They talk about orange pilling people. That doesn't help with the adoption because they think that the people who are using Bitcoin today are a little bit weird and a little bit techy. And then the third thing I would say is, for Azteco, is people don't know that they need an Azteco voucher until they know that they need Bitcoin. So we actually have to start by educating people and communicating to people why they should use Bitcoin. You can use Bitcoin to send money to other countries. You can use Bitcoin to save or spend. Once people understand why they need Bitcoin and why they can use Bitcoin, then we can follow on and say, right, we've got this thing called an Azteco Bitcoin voucher, but we have to almost like educate them on Bitcoin first and Azteco second.
Yeah. And moving with that, with the obstacles, what are the main obstacles you identify for a wider adoption of Bitcoin in Brazil and how we can overcome this? Because especially now, I feel like everything moves very fast and we definitely need to find ways to overcome this as a society and how you feel like that can happen in Brazil.
Yeah. So the first two things, good marketing, awareness and education. So at the moment, there's a lot of people that don't know Bitcoin is something that they can use to solve a real problem for them. They don't realize that there are people like them around the world using Bitcoin to solve everyday problems. So one of the things that we kind of need to do within Azteco and also with our partners is just raise awareness of it's not the technology, it's what it can do for you. There's people like you around the world doing things like you, but they're using Bitcoin. So first of all, just general awareness that like, hey, Bitcoin is for people like me. And then the second thing is a bit more kind of detailed education. And the problem here is people often get bombarded with the wrong kind of educational content for Bitcoin. So people are always talking about blockchain and mining. They're always educating on how Bitcoin works technically. My kids at school, they have lessons in classes about the internet. They don't learn about Wi-Fi routers and IP addresses and all those kind of complicated things. They learn how to use the internet safely. So I think we need to kind of the same kind of education for Bitcoin. It's not about blockchain, mining, and how all these things work. It's about how I, as a consumer, can use it safely in my everyday life. And then the third thing that I think is kind of crucial to the adoption of Bitcoin is spending Bitcoin. You know, there's three parts basically. Where do I get my Bitcoin from? Is Azteco. Where do I manage my Bitcoin? Well, here's a couple of great wallets that we could recommend. And then people are saying, okay, where can I spend my Bitcoin? Where can I actually go and spend it day to day? And so we need more mainstream retailers to start offering Bitcoin as a payment option. So for example, G2A, which is a global gaming platform, you can buy your games, your game codes, your skins on there now. And at the checkout, they'll give you a whole range of payment options, and one of them is Bitcoin. Or for example, in South Africa, there is a supermarket chain called Pick n Pay. So they have 2,200 stores across the country. And in all of those stores, you can go in and pay at the till with Bitcoin. You just select your payment method, Bitcoin, it shows you a QR code, you scan it, it's done. And we know there's examples as well in kind of Sao Paulo, there's some kind of great brewery chains that are doing the same kind of thing, letting you pay for your food and your drink, you know, normal everyday stuff. Buy my groceries, buy some games, buy some beer, buy a pizza. So I think those are kind of the big obstacles. Awareness, Bitcoin is for someone like you. Education, this is how you use it safely. And then spending, where can I actually spend it on normal everyday things?
Yeah, that's very cool. Here in São Paulo, actually, we have also, like it's growing every day, and it's pretty good because we have now the Qualidog app that has pharmacies online that you can get with Bitcoin and finish your purchase with Bitcoin Lightning, and the brewery, and I feel like it's definitely opening up a lot of doors. Also, I hope we can, near Porto Alegre, we have Volante, which is a very cool city that has over 100 places with Bitcoin, and I hope we can get that in Brazil. So yeah, right, Yuri?
Yes, I think it's a very interesting thing because I think in Porto Alegre is very different than São Paulo and another city from Brazil. So I think, David, when you say about the bad reputation, I think in Porto Alegre is very strong thing, So, but I think the process for the time is very good for us for try to understand for the good thing for the Bitcoin, for using Bitcoin things here in Porto Alegre. So I think Azteco have a good space, and I appreciate all these things. And I think the question I will make for you right now is, what's the plan for Azteco from Brazil? Because, I think it's a very good company, and São Paulo and Nisa say a lot of things for us. So what's the Azteco plan for Brazil?
Yeah. So like we just said a minute ago, awareness and education, those are the first two things. We want to work not on our own. We want to work with other partners, other organizations who have the same mindset as us. We want to make people in Brazil aware that hey, the perception of Bitcoin, it's there, but it's not actually accurate. And there's lots of people like you using Bitcoin in the same way. So there's a lot of customer stories we'd like to work on there. And then education, how do I use Bitcoin safely? It's not really education, because if you call it education, people don't like it, but it's just, again, talking to people, communicating to them as normal kind of human beings. This is Bitcoin, this is how you use it. And then the adoption, get started. How do I get started? Well, number one, buy an Azteco Bitcoin voucher. So that's where we're working on distribution. So at the moment, you can buy an Azteco Bitcoin voucher in Brazil. You can pay by cash in the store. You can buy online from some partners. So our plan is to add many more partners in the coming months, as well as doing this awareness and education in the market.
I think the good phrase you say is about everything's about the education, because in Brazil we have this problem. It's a big problem for us. I think not just Porto Alegre but all the country is education, and this passes for the for the culture about the Bitcoin things and another So yeah, I think the most important thing is education for us. So yeah. I'm agree with you.
And the best education is a story about someone else. It's not an educational course, because lots of people don't want to do that. Here's somebody like you called Isa who does this and this and this, and this is how she does it. So again, that's very much how we want to focus on kind of people using Bitcoin and not the technology underneath Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very, very good. So moving on a little bit from the Bitcoin topic, let's go a little bit to leadership because I think it's an important topic for our youth here. So moving back a little bit on your career background, what management lessons you bring from experiences in big techs like the ones that you've been in, Apple, Smart Things, and all these companies? What are the most important management lessons you got in your career?
So I'd say the first one is the customer experience is priority number 1, 2, and 3. Lots of people talk about put the customer first, put the experience first. But one of the things I really, really learned at Apple was, what it really means to put the customer experience first. So it means that any meetings or discussions you have internally, yes, you'll talk about cost, you'll talk about profitability, you'll talk about effort and timing, but those are all second level things. At Apple, the first question was always, what's the best customer experience? Doesn't matter the cost, doesn't matter how long it takes, doesn't matter how difficult it is. Is this experience better or is this experience better? And at Apple, that was very much the unspoken principle which guided every single meeting and decision. What's the right customer experience? And we always said it was very simple to make a complicated customer experience, but it's very complicated and very difficult to make a simple customer experience. So I think having a management team that kind of aligns around a clear principle like that, and the thing that guides our decisions is the customer experience. That's hugely powerful. The second thing I'd say I learned, particularly at Apple, is build scalable solutions. So when I was there, the company was growing just year after year at a tremendous rate. And we had to learn this kind of importance of scalability, because if we fixed today's problems, by the time we fixed them in 3 months, the company had already grown dramatically and there was a different kind of problem. So you had to kind of, yes, manage the day-to-day, but you also had to kind of look ahead 6 months, 12 months, 18 months and say, right, we have to solve the problem today, but in a way that it's still going to work in 18 months' time. And it's going to be scalable when we're 10 times, 100 times as successful and we've got more customers and more products. So I think customer experience as a outward-facing thing and scalability is like an inward-facing principle. Those are the two big things I would say I've learned.
Good.
So, David, what are the main challenges you face in your first leadership position in these companies?
So it took me a little time actually to figure out the difference between management and leadership. Because when you become a manager, before that, you've just been you've been a person doing your own job. And then you become a manager and you realize that, okay, I'm a manager. I need to get all these other people to do what I want them to do, but I need to make them motivated to do it because they want to do it. So management is about making sure that things get done at the right time, the right things at the right time. It's making sure that things don't get lost or broken. Leadership is completely different. It's really about challenging and breaking the status quo so that your team or the organization can grow and move forward. So management is getting people to do what they're supposed to be doing. Leadership is getting people to do something they've never done before and perhaps they don't even think is possible. So I think managers need to worry about inefficiency. Is the process running? Is it running efficiency? Leaders need to worry about obsolescence. Are we going to be relevant to our customers in 6 months' time? In 2 years' time, is there going to be something happening in the market that kind of kills us? And sometimes you're a manager, sometimes you're a leader as well, and you have to worry about those. But when you're a leader, the risk is that the day-to-day challenges of management, fixing small things, get in your brain and take your time away, and you forget to look at like the big leadership, the big vision things of how do you make sure you're still relevant in 2 years' time, for example.
Yeah. That's good. So that was quite interesting. Now moving on a little bit from the leadership part, I wanted to ask you something about, because you were here at LibertyCon Brazil last year in 2023. What's an advice you would give to all the young people that were there and trying to build up a more freer future and trying to build up not only their own beliefs, but and stand up for their own beliefs, but also, build up this freer future, build up their careers and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's a great question. And I really enjoyed being there at LibertyCon last year. That was an amazing event. So the two things I would say is, when you want to build a freer country or freer society, there's two things that come to mind. One is challenging the status quo. There are existing ways that things are being done that, they're not the most free ways for most people. And sometimes whoever's in charge of that status quo knows exactly what they're doing. They're restricting freedoms and they want to. Sometimes they don't realize that the status quo is restricting people because they don't realize how things are changing. So I think the first thing to do is kind of figure out who are the people who are kind of blocking in the future, who are the status quo people. And then, like I said, at LibertyCon, it's all about communication. How do you communicate to these people that, like, hey, you're the status quo, and because you're the status quo, you're blocking advancements and freedoms. So there's that part, looking at the status quo and trying to challenge it and change it. The second thing I think about is making a clear path for the people behind you. So there's other people like, a couple of years younger than you, or in a different kind of state or in a different city. And those people would benefit from a helping hand. How can you create more freedoms for them? So the things that you're doing today or we're doing today, how can I make sure that that person kind of 2 steps behind me on the path benefits from that? Because sometimes you need to change the status quo, and sometimes you just need to make sure there's a clear path behind you so that other people can kind of come through really quickly as well.
That's very good. Yeah. So Yuri, do you want to finish up our questions?
Yeah, I'll have the lastly, and I want to say thank you, David, for your time. I think it's a very good interview. It's a pleasure for us, for Instituto Atlantos Institute, for making these questions for you. So, lastly, I want to ask you about, can you give some books recommendations for us for starting for this, to know about the Bitcoin, for the leadership?
Yeah. So I could give you lots and lots of book recommendations. I'll give you just 3. So one book I recommend to a lot of people is a book called Building a Story Brand by a guy called Donald Miller. So it's a very easy book to read. It's a great audio book as well. When you first read it, it seems like it's about branding and marketing, but it's really about how to communicate with people effectively, which is something you need to do as an individual, something you need to do as a business. So Building a Story Brand, I definitely recommend. It's just like a good kind of entry, easy to read book on communications. The second book I recommend is a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And I really wish I'd read this book 20 or 30 years ago. It's all about how to make, small changes in your personal life or your professional life that add up over time to really sticky little habits. So one of the ones he talked about, for example, was, if you're trying to build the habit of going to the gym every day, just start by 5 minutes. You don't have to commit to a 60-minute workout. Just commit to 5 minutes, which is a really easy commitment. And then what you'll discover is when you're there doing 5 minutes, you're like, oh, I'm here. I'll do 10 minutes. I'll do 15 minutes. So it's very good at kind of forming habits in a simple step-by-step way. So Atomic Habits is great. And the third book, which is one of my best books I've loved for a long time, is a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by a guy called Robert Pirsig. So number one, it's not a book about Zen and it's not a book about motorcycle maintenance, really. It was published 50 years ago when people were first realizing how technology was affecting their lives and was depersonalizing things and was making everything a bit kind of process-like. So it's fascinating reading it because the things that they worried about 50 years ago are still just as relevant today in different ways. But also it's a book which is about quality. I would say that's the main theme of the book, is what is quality? Because we all know when we see it, but you can't explain it. So what is it? Why is it important? Why is it important for meaningful work? So again, all the work we're doing today, we want to do quality work. What does that really mean? And also, it's just a really beautifully written book. But it's a book to read when you go on holiday. It's a slow read, not a quick read. But yeah, those would be my 3 for today anyway.
Great. Thank you so much, David. It was very great. We actually had last year we were with some people from Instituto Atlantos. Yuri was not with us because he was in Africa, but we actually had the pleasure of meeting James Clear at Level Up. It was a great opportunity. Some people from our both of our groups were there, so it was really cool. But yeah, it was so great to have you here. It was a great interview. Thank you for your time. Thank you for talking a little bit about Azteco with us. And, you know, I'm a part of Azteco as well. So I invite you all to get to know a little bit better on our social media. We have a design channel on social media now in Portuguese. So if you go, you can follow at Somos Azteco and get to know us better. And we'll have amazing educational content for you to know a little bit more about Bitcoin really soon there. So yeah. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you, David.